of Jung at Harp. Today we're going to talk about how to be present to ourselves. I'm Deborah Henson-Conant. I'm here with Kathleen Wiley. I am a composer performer, and Kathleen Wiley is a Jungian psychoanalyst. We both play the harp, and so we call this Jung at Harp. And each week we come up with a question that we want to discover through conversation. So unlike some podcasts where people are talking about this is how to do this, or this is all about the art of conversation, just by having a conversation. And we invite you into that conversation. And the art of conversation is all about discovering through communicating, instead of having an opinion to start with. So, Kathleen, I am really interested in the idea of being present to ourselves and how we do that. And I'm curious, like, what could be the opposite of that? I mean, I know it would be not being present to ourselves, but what do we think we're trying to do when we often become unpresent to ourselves? I mean, I'm thinking that we may be trying to achieve something in particular that creates that then leads to us focusing on that rather than focusing on being present to ourselves. This is just not a thought I have.
Yeah. No, I'm hearing 2 or 3 questions in your question.
Well done.
So, yeah. So one thought when I think about what's the opposite of being present with yourself, it's being disconnected or dissociated from yourself. And what we know about dissociation, which is an extreme form of disconnection, is that it is an automatic, primitive response that our psyche goes into when we are having an experience in the moment that we are experiencing in our body through sensations and emotions and affects that are overwhelming to us, and we don't know what to do with it. And so there's this like automatic, it's almost like the breaker going off in your breaker box, or the power strip, what protects your computer when it trips off, so that if there's a power surge, it's like that. It's like this automatic disconnect. So I think one of the biggest trigger for that to happen is overwhelm, and it is an overwhelm one is experiencing physically in their body as well as emotionally. And it often and can be triggered and is accompanied by also a mental overwhelm where we are learning something new. We are engaging in a task. We are wanting to have creative expression, even though we are struggling with our insecurities about it. So I think the question about what is it that we're doing when that disconnect kicks in, so I think that often overwhelm is the trigger. Part of staying present to ourselves when we're overwhelmed, whether it's overwhelmed with a new task at hand or it's overwhelmed by emotions that are coming up unbidden, or we're overwhelmed by body innervation like anxiety or that kind of weighted down heaviness or that kind of agitation like we can't get still, is to really come back to our body, mind, and do exercises that are grounding. So in my Essential Embodiment Practices Circle, we work with very basic kinds of things you can do anywhere, like stopping, closing your eyes, feeling your feet on the ground, feeling whether or not there's tension in your body, doing what often is called a body scan, just to locate yourself. Because to be present to ourselves, we have to locate ourselves, and we're not going to find ourselves out here. We're only going to find ourselves in here.
Wow, I'm hearing so many things. So first of all, just kind of going backwards, I'm imagining that there's a map and that we're looking for that map for that point of like, you are here. And that sometimes there's so much turbulence around us that I'm imagining that if we were looking at a map and there were turbulence and we were looking down, we would not be able to see or connect with where is here. where is here and where is now. The other thing that I'm hearing you say is that, and it's interesting because we chose the topic of presence, how to create presence, and yet I'm hearing you immediately talk about overwhelm as the opposite side of that. And I'm hearing you also talk about overwhelm as that like that it's a trigger that almost disconnects us. So that when we hit that overwhelm, like you talked about a surge suppressor, or if you don't have a surge suppressor, that we can hit that overwhelm. And I'm also curious, I am curious if you're hearing, when Kathleen speaks, I'm hearing sort of, I don't know what it is, something in the sound. So I'm curious if you're listening to this, if you're hearing that also, if you're hearing that in me and in Kathleen, or whether that's just something I'm hearing on my end. So it'll be helpful for us to know that. And you can, by the way, we're on several channels right now, but you can chat, you can be part of this conversation, and we can monitor that as well. So surge suppressor, if in fact, okay, yes, there's a little bit of static. Okay. All right. Okay. So Kathleen, can you just check your microphone? And you did that before, and it seems to work. And it is, and Jacqueline, is it on both of us or just on Kathleen? And by the way, it seems to happen in this particular setting. Not bad, though. Not
bad. Okay.
Okay, that's good to hear. Always good to know.
All right. So you can still understand us, okay, Jacqueline, and anyone else who's there.
Okay. Great. And by the way, let's just take this moment to think about that. So when we're actually, it's just Kathleen. Okay. All right. So when we're experiencing that static, like we're maybe experiencing now, this is a really perfect opportunity for us to think about and look at what can we do to get present, even within a situation where we're experiencing that static, which may, it may have to do with the microphone. We don't know what it has to do with. And I'm sort of trying to monitor it here, but I can't really tell. So Kathleen, let's talk about how do we remain present when there is something like that happening?
I think the first thing we have to do is not blame ourselves for the static and not go into feeling as if somehow we've done something wrong. One of the things we all need in order to be present in the moment, and we need to be present in this task of video and streaming live, is we need support. And part of support is the information that will inform us and expand our understanding of what's happening. So for us with this setting, that's techno geeks, but for us in our life, or even at our harp and our music, it's stopping to know what's happening inside of us. Are you hearing me?
Yeah. And I'm also just really struck by how this situation parallels so much in life. That the very first thing is the acknowledgement, is the understanding, oh, there's some static in this conversation, or there's some static in what I'm trying to do. The thing that I'm trying to be present to is not necessarily present to me, and I may not be able to control that in the moment. And therefore, do I get preoccupied by like, oh, this is not working, this is not working, this is not working. I mean, let's say my technology isn't working. Do I get thrown off by that? Or am I able to somehow connect with what's underneath it, with the fundamental communication at that moment, and then later on go back and manage whatever, may be creating the issue?
Yeah, that is a great insight right there, because sometimes in the moment we don't know, like we don't know right now what is creating the static. So if we can acknowledge that and hold our own center, hold to ourself, be present to our larger desire in this moment. I was laughing before we started recording about getting pulled into our my getting pulled into my toddler self where I want to throw things in a temper tantrum because things aren't working the way that I want to. Well, how often do we do that in life, in our relationships, when things aren't working the way we want? Or we do it at the harp or our instrument when we're learning a piece of music and we're playing and it doesn't go the way we want. And then we get all in that flustered 3-year-old state. So
and for me, and I want to put this in, for me, it's often starts me to hide in some way. And I just want to bring up something that I was thinking about this morning as I put on whatever I was wearing, and I walked through the house and I was like, do I look ridiculous? What if somebody said to me, you look ridiculous in that? And I think that this is going to connect in, and somehow I feel it is, that there's, and I thought, wait a minute, do we all have to look a certain way in order to wear a certain thing? If I had a body that was whatever, 2 feet tall or something, and I wanted to get dressed up, would I look ridiculous? Is there something ridiculous? And is that therefore some reason for us not to do what we're doing? So for example, right now, is it ridiculous that there's static? Or is it ridiculous? Right now I'm holding not a challenge, but a project where I've written this new piece of music. It's a challenging piece of music. I've invited everybody to play it and to share videos. And I know that it's not a piece that everyone can play yet because it's at an advanced level, but that doesn't mean that people can't play a little tiny bit of it and be there present in that one thing they're doing.
Right.
And I feel like somehow these all are connected to our being present and feeling like it's okay to be there as we are, who we are, regardless of the static coming in from outside. And then what do we do about the static, which is inside? Because I'm pretty clear that the reason that I would even worry about looking ridiculous is that that's already in my brain.
Right.
I'm going to bring one more thing into this just because it's here and because I drank coffee. I had a horrible buzz in my harp the other day. When I would play this note, the whole harp would just like buzz. And I couldn't figure it out. And finally, I took it into the bedroom and I laid it on the bed because I wanted to get it away from anything. I laid it down and I just kind of got really quiet for a minute. And I played the note and I saw this lever way up there vibrating. And I realized that it was loose. And that was what, there was something loose that was vibrating. And something way up here was making something way down here and in a different part of the instrument make a huge sound that vibrated through the entire instrument. And that is, I think, what happens when the static of somebody, saying something that we already think about ourselves, like I'm already worried that I might be ridiculous for whatever it is I want to do. And then that becomes this static and this, and then we're gone. We're no longer present to ourselves, to who we're bringing to the world, and to just being that.
Right. Yeah, one of the things I've been working on that's related to this is thinking about when a quote negative or undesirable unquote emotional state or body state gets activated. Instead of focusing on it, which means it's going to get bigger, it's just breathing deep and imagining it just flowing on out through my feet. And so often we don't flow things out through our feet and we get rattled. And the more rattled we get, the bigger the buzz seems to be.
Yeah.
The key in your problem solving and in your being present is you took the harp into a different space, which automatically meant you were going to be more present because familiarity breeds disconnection. Okay? Familiarity, the more familiar we are with someone or something, we tune out because we think we know. We kind of go on automatic pilot. It's kind of like the muscle memory when we play the harp and learning patterns. If you know a pattern, you don't have to think about it. Well, that's a positive use of that familiarity. But the negative uses are when there's something a little bit off. So you changed the environment, you took it into your bedroom, you laid it down, and then you said, I got quiet. You got quiet internally. Instead of your head being busy, busy, busy trying to figure it out, instead of being, in all of your fantasies about how catastrophic this was and this and that, that would be me.
Right.
You got quiet. And in getting quiet, your full presence came to bear and you could see something. You saw something that was right in front of you the whole time, but you hadn't been in the environment outer and inner to see it.
And it's really interesting that you're saying seeing, because up until that point, I had just been listening, because it was and I was doing the things that you do when you've got a buzz in your harp. I was playing it and, stopping, touching every part of the harp, didn't think to touch. So going to a different sensory. So we're talking about the subject that we gave ourselves today was how to be present to ourselves. And what I'm hearing is we have several senses that we can take. And we may not be, when we're not hearing, we may be able to go to feeling, or feeling in our body, or to what we can see. So we have a lot of senses that we can go to. And not just the sense of chocolate eating.
And not just the physical senses.
Because
Rudolf Steiner, who was a contemporary of Carl Jung and lived in the early 1900s, he developed a system of thought known as anthroposophy. But part of Steiner's theory is that we have an inner sensorium. And he says that we have 12 inner senses. In Jungian psychology, Jung attempted to talk about this with his psychological functions of thinking, feeling, intuition, and sensation. So for any of you out there who've ever taken the Myers-Briggs typology test, but these are, the seeing you did happened ultimately through the physical eye, but there was something else at work in what, for the moment, I'm just going to call the invisible realm and the inner world. And those inner world senses we can only access when our brain, our head, our cognition gets quiet. And when we bring our presence to bear on a particular situation or problem or just moment, it's as if something happens that we really can't quantify as one sense alone. It's kind of like, playing the harp is a beautiful example, but there's something that happens when you roll a chord that the sound is so much more lush and bigger than if you pluck the chord all at one time.
Okay, so I'm going to just try that now. Okay, yeah. So I'm just going to, I'm going to play, I'm just going to play this. That's a D minor, and now I'm going to roll it. And I'm going to do something else. I'm going to open it up so that the notes are the same notes, D, F, A, but I'm going to put them in a different order, D, A, F. And now I'm going to open them up and put it lower and maybe add. So I'm just experimenting here. I haven't added any. I've added more of the same thing, and now I'm just for fun. I'm going to add another note to the chord just to see what happens. Okay. All right. I was just experimenting. So wait, so how is that relevant in any way to what you were saying? You were saying when you put
Yeah,
okay.
I mean, it's relevant to me, and I'd be interested in those of you who are here with us, what if you felt the difference that when you played that root chord and plucked it, there was that's one experience that activates one thing, but when you roll it or when you play it in a different order, there's something greater that gets activated. There's a presence, and it's hard to talk about what
Mhm.
it is or to put into words what I'm trying to get at. But the mathematical principle is that the sum is greater than the total of the parts, and
Mhm. Mhm.
our inner sensorium, as working with our physical senses, is that thing. It's like it's greater than the sum of the parts.
I just wanted, we've got a
Yeah,
wonderful comment here from Lisa who's saying, this is so
yeah,
interesting. And she has to leave right now, but she said, I will experiment with changing my environment today and observing what happens. And that's beautiful. I
yes.
love that. And I think, I don't know this for sure, but I have a feeling that Kathleen is about to talk about changing your inner environment if we can't change our outer environment.
Yes, because ultimately, if we believe the alchemist and the great mystics and spiritual people, if our inner environment changes, then our outer experience will change. Even if the quote physical variables stay the same, we change. And changing our inner environment means we have to start where we are. We have to be present to what is inside of us. So, for instance, when our aggravation and frustration around the technology was getting activated, we were able to acknowledge it, laugh about it. I was able to, imagine being the 5-year-old stomping around, and it could just flow on through. It's like it was like rain coming into our landscape, but it did not have to become ice and stay stuck and get us frozen. So, part of being with our inner landscape and changing our inner environment is truly developing that ability to let things flow on through instead of holding on to them. We hold on and then we wonder why we keep getting the same results. Yeah, I had this experience playing my harp in front of a group of people this week because I have unfortunately struggled with getting really nervous, and I could play something beautifully in the room by myself, and then somebody walks in or people sit down to listen, and all of a sudden I'm bumbling. You'd think I didn't know anything. And I've been working a lot on letting that go. And so I had this experience, and several people had already played and started out with how anxious they were. And so as I got ready to play, this thought came into my mind about, oh, I get anxious. And I just thought there was just this really quiet voice that said, no, I'm not doing that. That's not helpful. That isn't going to help me get what I want in this moment. I'm not doing that. And I was able to stay centered and play beautifully. I'm going to claim that. I played it beautifully. But it's taken 3.5 years of really concentrated focus and developing my own sense of confidence and skills and valuing myself to have that moment happen. So it took 3.5 years, but you know what? The inner landscape changed. That's what matters.
Right, right.
And and so I think sometimes the reason the inner doesn't change is we want it like that. And it's kind of like, when we learn a piece of music on the harp and our teacher will say to us, okay, once you get it, then you practice it 10 times. Or
Right.
if you really want it, practice it 100. Don't get it once or twice and then quit.
Right. It reminds me of what the big difference that I discovered when I shifted from classical to jazz. So when I was playing classical music, it was about getting the notes. I get it. I can play it. And when I shifted to jazz and I realized jazz players were playing the same tunes for years and years and years. And it wasn't about getting the notes. It was about getting to the point of internalizing that you could let it get to you.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just it was an opposite. And I kind of want to bring this in now because we're talking about presence and we're talking about opposite. So inward and outward senses,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about even, I was listening for a buzz and then I saw it. And I was in a situation recently. I'm in a program where I'm learning how to build teams because this has been it's been missing in my life, my ability to do that. And as part of this, I'm sort of responsible for a certain team, and we were all trying to make sure that everybody has these games that they're playing in their lives, where they're bringing things into their lives. And I was responsible for everybody being effective in their games. Like, how am I going to do this? And I was focusing on like, how am I going to make that happen? And then suddenly, as I was talking to my team, and we said, okay, let's find the superpower for this.
Mm-hmm.
And we discovered that the superpower was to turn it in the other direction. That the point of having conversations with people was not to make sure that they were effective in what they were doing, but the fact that we could have that conversation became the opportunity for connecting to them.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, we're having turning this around would be, we're having a technical issue with the sound. That, do we try to fix it, or is that an opportunity for discovering more about sound, discovering more about how to deal with technical glitches when we're trying to have a conversation, which happens all the time. You were talking about the technical glitch that comes up when you feel nervous. My technical glitch that comes up in me and I lose the words. I don't know what they are. And what we do to be able to communicate through that. How do we turn it around or let go of it? I keep finding myself doing this because even though internally, the shift when I was listening for that buzz was to get calm, but then it came through a completely different sense. There's this thing, and then you were talking about how do we get out of the thing that we've built. See, now I'm like, well, I'm talking about okay, but let's enjoy that. What am I looking for here? I'm looking for a connection between all of these, between how we become present in playing music so that we are listening to what we are playing without judgment, but with beauty, that we are listening to each note, how we can become present to listening through the technical difficulties.
Yeah, I'm smiling because this is something that has to be developed over time. It's not something that, it's like a psychic muscle. That's what I say in my embodiment practices, is that the essential embodiment practices that my online circle works with are like specific exercise for isolating individual muscles that we need in order in any given moment in time to be fully present. And those muscles include, first of all, body awareness, knowing what's going on. So like right now, as I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm aware of a little bit of stirring in my abdomen, and I'm aware of a little pain in one of my ankles that I'm having. It's like having that as an ongoing source of information. Relaxation, being able to breathe and not tighten, because the minute we tighten, the flow stops. We know this at our heart. We work so much on releasing, and I'm sure with other instruments too. How do you not build up tension, i.e. tightness? So learning how to not tighten, to stay in the flow, being able to tune into our own rhythm, our own breath, our own heartbeat. So if you want the one quick tool you can use anywhere to help yourself be present in your own body, it's follow your breath. I'll put all of your attention on your breath and follow it. And if you sit down at your instruments, and I have been again working to just build this in, that before I start playing a note, I close my eyes and I breathe deeply and I feel myself. I feel me in my body. I feel myself there with my art. It's like bringing myself centered in that moment instead of being off in this thought, that anxiety, this worry, this thing that needs to be done next or whatever. So our breath is our most powerful tool, and there are many spiritual traditions that teach this. And then knowing what's going on in our mind, we like to think that we create our thoughts, and there are thoughts we do create, but there are a lot more thoughts we don't. I mean, just try going to sleep at night, and all of a sudden, your mind may be active. So getting to know what's really going on in our mind, and again seeing it as a way of learning to say, okay, there you are, I see you. And our presence with seeing what's going on inside of us, those niggling thoughts, those little body sensations and flutters, the various emotions that can go through, we can have, I've had all kinds of emotions flowing through since we've started talking today. That as we begin to just kind of realize that's part of how we work, it's like we're a flowing river, and the more we can cultivate the ability to see what's happening in the flowing river, then the more presence we have in any given moment, which is what allows what appears to be magic to happen, whether it's magic in our conversation where something emerges and the light bulb goes off, or it's magic at our instrument where all of a sudden we're playing something beautiful and it's not coming from a sheet of music, but it's coming from inside. No.
You know what I'm hearing in what you're saying, as you were talking about breathing, my mind was saying, and musicality, where does that fit in there?
Uh-huh.
And then as you started talking about breathing, I realized that so often musicality has to do with the phrasing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started thinking about my breathing, and I started noticing that my breathing has a natural phrasing.
Yes.
And so following my breath actually does lead to musicality,
Yes.
whether I'm speaking or whether I'm playing. And then I thought about what happens in my brain when I do follow my breath. Part of my brain is like, help, there's a gazillion other things. I'm going to forget them. I'm going to forget them. I'm going to forget them. And I realized at that moment that when we can turn those over, whether we're turning those over to a higher power, or whether we're turning them over, as a friend of mine has his body, he turns it over to his body. Mm-hmm. Like it almost doesn't matter what you're turning it over to, but it's almost turning it over for safekeeping. Otherwise, we're feeling like I got to take care of all that. And as you were talking about becoming present in yourself, I had this image of you, and then sort of faded, echo images of you off on either side of you being like, no, you got to do this, and no, you're doing it wrong. And I had this image as you talked about it of them coming into focus so that you're all one thing, like this deep river you were talking about, and a deep river that has a breath.
Yes.
So that it is the musicality of us being present in what we're doing. That's kind of how it all came together for me in this last part of what you were saying. And like Lisa said before she left, what I want to take from this conversation is, how do I bring even a little bit of presence at every moment, a little bit more? And Lisa pointed out the changing the environment of our thoughts. And I'm going to really use that breathing that you've talked about and the phrasing of that breathing into the river and the flow, and then turning all those other things that I'm worried about over with some kind of trust or faith or whatever to anything. Doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. I can turn it over to my harp or to my pen. It doesn't matter, with the trust that it will be there and that it will be resolved in some way outside of me, because it's not going to get resolved inside me if I keep fussing with it.
That's right. That's right. It's said that Albert Einstein had in his office a couch for
Uh-huh.
laying down when he got stuck on a problem. Lying meditation, we lie down, it opens our heart. That there was a well-worn path on the rug around his couch for walking meditation. People naturally pace when they're trying to figure something out. That there was a desk and a place where he could sit and receive. When we're sitting, we open up to greater knowledge. It's kind of the position of the student. And then standing, that when we stand with ourselves, standing writing at a chalkboard or standing playing our harp, then it gives us that sense of here I am with the root and the rootedness of me, the tree I am, the trunk, all of the branches able to flow. And the musicality is natural. Our voice naturally goes up and down. It undulates, it changes tone. We get loud, we get soft. Only when people have very early in life experienced a lot of trauma, then sometimes you'll get people who talk monotone like this and it just drives you crazy, like that robotic talk. But as long as our energy is flowing, there is a natural musicality. And my takeaway for today is to remember that when I sit down at the harp, is that there is a musicality around my love of this piece, because I've started only learning pieces I love. If I listen to it and it doesn't start humming in my head at some point, it doesn't get learned. That's what I decided, because I know if I start hearing it in my head, then it's taken root in me, and then it's like it's in my river and I can flow with it. Otherwise, I'm always getting out of my river trying to get in somebody else's. And so that's my takeaway, is I'm gonna really remember to honor what's in my river, and with my music and with what I want to play and the tunes that I learn, that they're things that have a home in the river of my energy system and my being. And being present enough to what's happening inside of me, instead of getting caught up in, well, they're doing it, I should do it too. That has no place in my river.
Well, that's really beautiful. And one of the things that I heard in my head when I heard you say that is to tune into that, to become present. And like, this has become, this is resonant in me. This tune is take resonance in me. And I will give it voice. And whether that voice is through our voice or through our hands or through the way we move. And as we're present with what we are giving voice to, rather than what we think we should, all those other voices that are in our heads, but what we want to give voice to, what we are here to give voice to, not all the things that were put in there that we are voicing. I think that seems like a presence.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I'm looking forward to talking more about this. I think so many things have come up, this idea of musicality and just even more presence. I'm looking forward to that. I know that we need to end. And I want to thank you everyone for being here today and for your comments and, feeding back to us about the sound. And we will work with this platform more to see, because it's so wonderful to be able to actually connect with you, which we can't do when we're just on Zoom. And so that's, thank you for being part of that. So Kathleen, thank you once again for a conversation that takes me into parts of myself that I want to live in. And I hope that everybody else will join us. Or will we be here next week?
Next week on Friday.
On Friday. Okay, we'll be back to our usual time on Friday. Thank you so much, Kathleen. Thank you.
Bye-bye.